All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Un-Trumepd. Two guys talking truth from two sides on Trump. Episode 2. My name is Doug Pagitt, and I need to stop my... Pardon me for 1 second. I've got a lot going on. I am broadcasting from California, not in my usual place. And I'm joined by Adam, who is in his normal place there in San Antonio. I'm normally in Minneapolis, and we are making a regular date here on Thursday night, Adam and I, to have this Un-Trumepd conversation. And I've had to set up a separate traveling system for the video and the audio. We're really excited that all of you are willing to be with us for this conversation, which is not only an experiment technologically, but it's an experiment for the two of us in trying to have a civil conversation from two people who think differently on a topic that's really important to each other. Adam, I again want to thank you for your willingness to be part of this and to be untrumping with me.
Yeah, absolutely, Doug. I think it's worthwhile, and I'm enjoying it.
So, for those who are new to this concept, here's what's happening. A while back, I asked around on Facebook if someone had a suggestion for a friend or a pastor who they would recommend that I could have a series of conversations with to help me understand how it was that a person of good Christian faith, a person who takes their faith seriously, a person who takes their country seriously, a person who takes their intellect seriously, all these things, could be a supporter of Donald Trump. I'm a Christian, I'm a pastor, and I have found it just really difficult to understand how someone could hold the same convictions I do, hold the same faith that I do, want to live in the world in a way that is informed by the narrative of their Christian faith and the life of Jesus, and wrap themselves around or allow themselves to be wrapped into the narrative of Donald Trump as a president of the United States. So I asked around, do people have friends? Do they have a pastor or someone who I could be in this conversation with? Partly because I didn't want to be in a conversation only with people I already knew or who were friends of mine. I know some people who support Trump, but we already have a relationship and all the complications that can come into that. I was looking for a stranger, frankly, someone for whom we could form a relationship around this topic, to be able to talk truth to each other and to have to really learn from one another, to learn from someone who I didn't already know and someone who I didn't already have the benefit of knowing the details and to appreciate their lives. And fortunately, Adam is a friend. Have a mutual friend, and Adam was good enough to say that he'd be part of this. So that's what we're doing for 7 weeks. This being our second, we are going to explore a conversation with one another about how it is that Adam supported Donald Trump. And in coming weeks, we're going to talk more about maybe why it is that I hold the views that I hold. We can get into that. Adam, would you say a little bit about your background? What brought you into all of this? What's interesting for you, for those who are new to our conversation?
Sure, Doug. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor in churches for a long time. I was a senior pastor and worship pastor and did a lot of that. And a couple of years ago, I sort of got out of that and went to work for a group that did the digital campaign for Donald Trump. We had their account for a number of years. And so I had a unique view, first as someone who was on the inside working on the initial portion of the campaign. I never worked on the general campaign once the RNC got involved in the presumptive nomination, but and so during that process, I saw things from the inside. I began engaging. It sort of developed over the next 12 to 16 months, my support for him and what I began to see.
Okay, thanks, Adam. We're getting a little bit of a lag. You cut out a couple of times there, so let's see how this goes. And if we have to reestablish a connection, we'll take a pause and do that. So Adam has a conviction of Christian life and faith. Ended up on one side of this topic. I have a commitment of Christian faith and life, and we both care about our country. And we've ended up on different sides. In other ways, we're similar people. We're both white males. We're both approaching or deep inside of middle-aged. We're both educated. We both like to wear Apple Watch. Like there's so many things that we have in common. And then on this, there's such difference. And one of the things we're trying to do with this whole notion of Un-Trumepd, and the name is particular. We spent some time thinking about what the name was going to be and how we would posture this, is trying to have a little play on words of the notion that people have of trying to trump one another, where you can get that one comment in, you can get that one statement. Well, why don't you just say this? And then the person is stymied. And of course, they'll be shown to hold some opinion that's not valid to hold. So we're trying to engage in a conversation like this without trumping one another, right? So we want this to be an untrumped conversation where we don't play that game, where we actually try to get one another and not just play a game of gotcha with each other. So that's what we're trying to do. And also, I'm trying to be untrumped. I'm trying to get Trump out of my head. I'm trying to get some of my concern and worry and freak out of my brain, because I am really disturbed by some of the results and what I interpret as the meaning of people who are of the Christian conviction in this country supporting Donald Trump. So I'm trying to get myself unraveled a little bit from my conflict and my fear around the effects of Donald Trump. How about you, Adam? How are you thinking about this untrumpedness?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much along in the same lines as you there, to not do the gotcha thing, but really try to get people to move just from which proves your character because you didn't agree. Because part of it is, look, so when someone plays a trump card on you, it's already happened. Mm-hmm. People are already playing trump cards on people, so to speak. Trump is the president of the United States, and he's going to be that way for another 3 years at least. And I think that there is an important aspect that, the right had to go through for 8 years. And, we have some compassion on it, where we realize, all right, how do we live in an American culture understanding that this is the president? Can we support the institution of the president, a strong, unified nation, while also saying, I oppose these ideas or these policies? It takes some hard work in there to both support our nation.
Yeah, Adam, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's a great way to frame this for people who would have found the presidency of Barack Obama to have been so off-putting to them, so different than their imagination of the world. I know it was a difficult 8 years, and there were a lot of people who thought differently about Barack Obama's presidency than I did, who were certainly freaking out about the fact that he was the president of the United States and what they saw as the decisions that he was making. I do think in one of our future conversations, this will be an interesting thing to see if there really are the correlations, however, between these two ways of acting and behaving, because it seems to me that there's something demonstrably different about what's happening with Donald Trump. The numbers of people across our society, whether it was the millions of people who came out in the march the Saturday after the inauguration, or generals in the military, or people inside the institutions who, from what I hear, are really afraid. Not just people on the left, not just people who are typical for their freak out whenever an administration different than their own opinions is in office. We always have that. This feels like there's a different level at which people across the system, in the government and outside, professionals in the area, and people who are just regular citizens and don't think so much about the presidency, are really concerned. So I think that's part of what's made this conversation between you and I interesting, is that for those of us who follow politics in news sources, or on television, or on internet videos of professionals, there's this professional gloss to the whole thing that I think you and I have to get to at a whole other level, because, we're just two guys trying to have a strong enough internet connection to be able to have this conversation with each other, right? We don't have the advantage that so many other people have, of a lot of support behind their ideas. We're just a couple guys trying to do this live in front of thousands of other people on the internet, and trying to see if it's possible to have goodwill toward one another, and to really understand one another's perspective. So I would love to, in some of the future weeks, really talk about, are we just in the normal zone where people have to say the other party won, everybody rally together, support your president, work for the policies you want, and you'll have another election in 3.5 years, or is this made of a different fabric? You're not convinced it's made of a different fabric, are you?
No, I think it is made of a different fabric.
Oh, hey Adam, we're getting some cutout. I wonder if what we should do here is have you turn off your video for a bit and see if the audio will just come through. We're for those who are watching this, we're using a system called Zoom, and Zoom allows us to broadcast the video and audio sort of together, and then broadcast that on. Better? Yeah, I think so. Let's give that a try. So you were saying you do see it as a different fabric than what we've typically had in our political life.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that, let's not forget about the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that came out at the Women's March the day after the inauguration. And I would say to that, let's not forget about the hundreds of thousands of people that came out for rallies across the United States to come and support him that were just fundamentally not covered. But there's ample records. I mean, it's epic, hundreds of thousands of people at rallies in Jacksonville a couple of weeks before the election. People turning out in remarkable numbers just to see the man as he comes through a local area to talk. There was a hunger for something that was driving a huge portion of America to connect to him.
Yeah, and that's what's been helpful in our conversation last week and in preparation for this, is that you've been able to help me see that this met a need that was significant to people, and not only framed in the way that my tendency had led me to believe, that it was people who were either really scared, too scared, people who were wanting to close the borders, the people who wanted to have a kind of America that flashes back to the times when things were great, this mythical time of whatever time when America was great, and we're going to make it that way again. You've helped me to recognize, well, look, whether or not that was the rhetoric, there was something inside of people that was clearly not being met, and was touched by what Donald Trump had to say. And that's the part that I never really got. I knew there were a lot of people who felt left out of the political system. Of course there are. Our politics of Democrat and Republican do not meet the needs of this country. Most people don't even vote. Most people are not engaged in politics. There's no doubt about that fact. What I was shocked by was that the things Donald Trump was saying would be the kinds of things that people would say, that connects with me. That's the part from our conversation. One of the parts from our conversation last week that I found so helpful was your articulation that that's a real thing right there. And it's been very easy for people like me to be in the panic mode and to not recognize, well, why in the world would that number of people still be supportive of Donald Trump?
Yeah, well, I understand that the panic is significant with Trump. And you had mentioned that the panic is it's different than Obama, because now there's people on the inside of the government. There's long-term people on the inside of the government that are concerned. And it's the only, maybe bipartisan thing that he's doing. Both sides are terrified about it.
That's scary.
And I can tell you this much from a long.
Yeah, and we're having that problem again. I think we should try it with your video off one more time.
Well, I'm getting some feedback from folks online that they can hear and see me fine, and maybe just me. Yeah, boy, they're in your
boy. If that's not if that's not an image of what's going on, that it's not that nobody else can not hear you. It's just me that can't hear you. Right? Yeah. There's other people that are hearing you just fine. I'm the guy that can't quite get the clarity. Okay, well that's interesting. All right, so keep going.
And I mean, the freak out is on the inside of the government, right, as well. And I think that the one of the main differences between this era of Trump now is that he really was there was a large portion of America that not just about Obama, but about his policies and about the way that he was moving Americans' sovereignty and handing that over to a United Nations or to more of a globalist,
Yeah.
strength and authority. And Trump has come in and said, it's a nationalism, most certainly, which, there are elements of nationalism that deeply concern me and that I'm watching and praying on. But there was a big component of him that it's important that the U.S. not cede its national sovereignty and its national strength to a set of foreign powers that don't have our interest in, and the inside of the government and stirred up the establishment.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's bloody messy.
Yeah, I get it. And those sound like the similar arguments that were made back in the 1990s. I remember conservatives saying in the 1990s that Bill Clinton was turning over the authority of U.S. troops to the UN, that's what was going on in Bosnia, and that was a big reason that he didn't go into Bosnia. Yeah. So, I mean, those are some of the arguments, right? The argument that and those have been going on since the founding of the UN. That's a normal conversation between conservatives and liberals, or conservatives and progressives, or sometimes Democrats and Republicans, or sometimes nationalists and globalists. And you can have people on all the mixes there. That's all normal. Here's the thing that I learned from you last week, and I want to see your thoughts on this going forward, see if I heard you right. You felt like, this is what I heard you saying last week, that you felt like Donald Trump, even with all of his flaws, did meet the standard that was necessary, a minimum standard to be supported by you as a Christian person, as a conservative Christian person. That maybe he's not the perfect conservative, maybe he's not the ideal Christian candidate, but it was enough to say, I could support him, and that you sensed God's hand was maybe in this. This was something significant happening in our country. We should take a minute and see if maybe this isn't a movement that could bring about something revolutionary, even with a flawed character. And that Donald Trump was sufficient enough to, and certainly better than, for our conversation this week, certainly better than the alternative in your mind. And that was the thing that pushed Donald Trump over. What you take all the other arguments about conservatism, and if those are going to be supported, like you're bringing up about the United States' role in the world, Donald Trump was a flawed but good enough vessel. Is that right? I've reflected on this over the last week, and it feels like those two things is what you were sharing last week.
Yeah, I think that's a good recapitulation of that. I never made of, well, they need to have this, but he's here and he's sort of flawed here, and what's sort of the minimum viable product that I need for the president. But that really up, and I really, the biggest part of it, and this is what I was trying to articulate last week, is I began to see things happen that just shouldn't be.
Yeah, you're breaking up on my end again for this recording and what people are seeing on the feed. But what I'm hearing you saying is you saw some things happening that said to you, there's something afoot here that feels like it matches something that would have God's blessing upon. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I always want to.
Okay, now here's the fun side for me on, or the part I want to be careful on, and I also think it's the fun part about you and I having our friendship being made, live in front of people, that we can ask some questions of each other that and push back on some ideas that we've exchanged without feeling like we're, violating our friendship. And I don't mean this in any kind of a rude way, but over the last week, what those responses felt like to me was, hey, look, he's the GOP candidate. He's the Republican candidate. And I'm going to support the Republican candidate. And I will come up with whatever rationale I need to have to support that candidate. When it was George Bush, and it was George Bush following the Bill Clinton campaign, then it was character matters. But now it's not the character matters. Or it needed to be someone who had a really strong lifetime commitment to issues of life. Well, this one, he's a new convert, so then that's different. So he's even has greater zeal. That it feels like, and this is what I've gotten from Republicans and conservatives over the years, even when I was one, was we're primarily committed to the GOP and to the Republican platform. And that's where who we're going to vote for. And we will come up with some rationale or wrapping or packaging to make that person seem acceptable to our Christian convictions. And meanwhile, say we first vote our convictions and then vote our party. And this is the part that seems odd to me. I felt like Donald Trump would be someone who the Christians would have to say, okay, we can't even make that. We can't even make that that attempt this time. We just need to sit this one out. But instead, some people, and I think you help represent that group, dove in really hard to being supporters of Donald Trump. So can you talk me through that suspicion that I have, that it just feels like you're just finding a changing set of rationale to every candidate on why this person meets the Christian standard?
I hesitate to say this because I know there's a number of people watching and many of them don't know me.
Yeah. Hey, Adam, hey, Adam, can you try this? I think what's happening is we have two different feeds going. So I think people are seeing you on one side, but your audio is cutting out on just about every answer.
Okay.
On the Zoom, can you just try that camera off and see if that
Sure
helps the audio at least? Let's give it a try. Okay, so I didn't hear any of that other than you saying you were hesitant at the beginning to try to make any suggestion about this because people don't quite know you.
It is beyond my capacity to give you a rational definition of now. That doesn't mean that it isn't reasonable. I think that I understand that how you would struggle and why you would feel like it's just another ploy, because you're just going to vote the party line and you're going to be a one or two issue voter, and you're not going to Republicans. And I'm sure that there's plenty of them that actually behave that way and vote and think that way. But what was remarkable was that there was a whole nother thing going on. And I mentioned this last week, that what that event and what that story was. And ultimately for me, I both believed in the things that I began to hear.
Yeah. Hey, your audio's not any better with the video off, so I think you can turn it back on for people to be able to see you. Okay. So what I was piecing together there was your suggestion that, yeah, you can see how that's the case, but frankly, there's something more grand going on here. And it's not that the one-offness, the oddity, the peculiarity of Donald Trump's election is something that just doesn't fit the rationale that some people like me are making demands on, right? Saying like, justify that answer. Why would you vote for that person? And you're suggesting, hey, that's just not something that is all that available. There's something more going on than fits that. Well, this is once in a generation, once in a lifetime kind of candidate that might be out of scope from the others, and there's something unusual happening.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that and give the impression that there aren't plenty of good reasons why I voted for Trump. There are a lot of reasons why I voted for Trump. A lot of good ones, a lot of the ones that I stand by that are reasonable, that I think his policies for the U.S. are much better than what Hillary represented. Why America, half or so got behind him, and, he got the outcome that he did. That has to include more than just reason.
But does it have to include more than just party line? Like we have a 48% Democrat Republican reliable electorate on both sides of that, and it didn't. Because the question I'm trying to answer for myself and others is the Christian turnout, right? This is a big question. Why did they turn out in every election? I mean, this isn't just this one. It's the Christians and motivated Christian people represent an enormous population in this country, and there's a lot going on there. What the thing that has struck someone like me so odd is that it feels like, other than being a conservative and saying I'm going to vote the way of Republicans, I can't come up with the thing that's going on. So maybe it is just he was good enough as a candidate to earn the Christian vote, if the Christian vote is 80% likely to vote for the Republican, at least the evangelical Christian vote.
Well, I mean, he turned out a bunch of people that voted Democrat.
Yeah, he did. That's true. That's really true. He did.
So he's not just turning out the white old Christian men, and you can go and look at the final tallies and the demographics and the counties that he won. And I think that maybe more to the point of what we were going to talk some about tonight at some point is that many people turned out, not just because they thought, yeah, Trump, but yeah, Trump, he's going to do something about the state of the things that we're in. And if Hillary gets a hold of it, we've got no hope. So there's a big about the direction that Obama.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, Adam, because one of the two questions I had for you is how much of this was an anti-Hillary vote? And that's fair, right? There's people. I know a lot of people who came out and voted because they didn't want Donald Trump, an anti-someone vote. I mean, I guarantee in 2020, I don't care who the candidate is, I am voting anti-Donald Trump. So I'm not trying to say that an anti-vote is a bad thing at all. But how much of it was that, and was the motivation there, and how much in your mind was also the key topic of abortion? And I know last time we talked about this, and you really wanted to make the point, I think made it very well, that people are not single-minded voters as much as those on the opposite side of their political opinions tend to say that they are. But how much of it was a real disdain of Hillary? And then if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about the issue of abortion. For you, how much of it was anti-Hillary?
It was anti-Clinton.
Oh.
Yes.
It
was anti-Clinton. And the way the whole Clinton machine for nearly 3.5 decades had been moving and operating at the upper echelons of American politics. So Bill is definitely involved. His shady dealings with Loretta Lynch and the stuff that was going on with the Justice Department and things that were spinning around the Clinton Foundation and all the stuff that was involved in the Clinton Foundations and the email scandals. And, you add all of the where there are some massive failings for her as Secretary of State, an Iranian deal, which was a massive sellout for our staunchest and most important ally in the Middle East, and then there's
Israel.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'm running through the hit list, right? And I'm sure you know what's coming next. We can talk about Benghazi, and we can talk about, the Iraq. We can talk about those things, but the American electorate that voted for Trump, that came out, were deeply concerned about what we considered pretty radical policies and social policies and foreign policy, where she would take that, solidify that, on top of all the corruption and crime we were seeing out of the Clintons.
Wow. Okay, so that's really helpful to me, because what I'm hearing you say is that for your agenda, the things that matter to you and to other maybe people of Christian faith, somehow the prospect of Hillary Clinton, who some people like me would put on a continuum as less activist, progressive, and liberal than Barack Obama, you have her on the side that was going to make things somehow even more so of a problem from what you saw in the Obama White House and with the Obama policies. Like you didn't see this as a pulling back to the Clinton days. You saw this as an acceleration from Obama into some other dark abyss, like the way that I described 4 years of Donald Trump being the president.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about Clinton, and tons of experience that leads us to that conclusion, where Trump is a relatively politically
That is fascinating. You're breaking up a little bit, but I think I'm getting the gist. You're saying that it's possible for you and easy for you to see how Hillary Clinton would have been as the president, and for you that was way worse than the 8 years of Barack Obama.
I don't know how I can say way worse than what Obama did, because he did some pretty significant things.
Okay.
Maybe not be able to take us in a further direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's, plenty good evidence for that.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this is one of those places where I think that the misunderstanding is so obvious in our society. Like as someone who's on that side and have been a Hillary supporter, some of the things that caused me to find it difficult to support her was I thought she wasn't activist, progressive, or liberal enough. I thought she was too middle of the road, too mainstream. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think she was too hawkish in war. I think she was absolutely too hawkish in war. I think she was far too supportive of Israel. I think her stance as compared to Barack Obama was that she was far more willing to maintain the status quo as far as it comes to Israel. I think her economic policy was far more supportive of Wall Street and of tax breaks and of keeping the economics as they typically were. Like the idea that Hillary Clinton was more progressive, other than being a woman, was more progressive than Barack Obama. That I can't find a topic on which that would be true. And you're saying, oh no, you would see it as.
I didn't say she would be more progressive. I just said that the things that Obama put in place and the prospect of her being able to do that, along with the criminal activity of the Clintons and the foundation and all the different things that were coming up, that was deeply concerning. And I do. I mean, those points you made are accurate. She's definitely.
Yeah. So was there, and you've, I just want to check something because I think you made a nice clarification there. When and if somebody was listening carefully, they would have noticed that I said Hillary a bunch of times, right? And then you said the Clintons. And I think two things were happening there. One, you were expanding it more broadly than just her as an individual and placing her inside of the relationship with her husband and the way that they have been in federal politics for 25 years. But I think you were also wanting to pull back some from the implication that my question had of calling her Hillary in a way that exemplified her as a woman leader, and that you were wanting to be careful to say, look, male or female, Bill or Hillary, it didn't matter. That's not what motivated me to be opposed to her. Was I hearing you right there?
Are you talking about? No.
Sorry, I just didn't hear you. You said.
I was just trying to clarify and understand the question of whether you're asking me if I was pulling back and not calling her Hillary.
Yeah, what I was asking was that embedded in the way I framed the question by referring to her as Hillary, had a sense of her as just the individual person, and that your beef with her is greater than just her as a person, and was not about her being a woman or not. It was more sophisticated, more bothered by the entire way the Clintons have behaved in the last 25 years.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It has absolutely nothing to do with her being a woman. I would personally really love to see a female president. And I loved seeing an African-American president. And I mean, it was a nice change of pace. I appreciated that. Race is to the highest of the land. There's something, while that breaks a glass ceiling, which I think is vital, I think it's too important of a job to just do it off of that.
Yeah.
And I do have deep concerns about the Clintons and the way that they've operated and their network of people and the people inside of the government that they are beholden to. I mean, that's a significant problem.
Yeah.
And the WikiLeaks and the email scandal began to start fleshing some of that out, and it all just got buried.
You know something we all don't know, you mean? Like, you know something from WikiLeaks that someone who follows the mainstream media doesn't know?
I mean, when you read the stuff that was reported on in those WikiLeaks dumps and reading the emails and reading the comments, a lot of that stuff doesn't get, parroted out or reported on in the mainstream media because it's a difficult thing. For them to really talk about. I mean, it's not that I have secret information.
I see.
But there was just a lot of stuff coming out on her.
Okay, so here's my question around that. It sounds like what you're saying is she's not the kind of person who's trustworthy, who has the temperament, who has the commitment to the law, who is committed to making sure that she is not above the law, and that disqualified her from being a reasonable presidential candidate. And I think you see where I'm going with this question. Like, with that standard on one side, how in the world do you not? You see where I'm going?
I can see that, and it's a T-ball setup.
Yeah, that's right.
And I want to just say that when I start talking about specifics, it seems like when I talk about specific issues, you pull back to generalizations about a character or kind of person. I don't not support Hillary because she's the kind of person I find untrustworthy. She is untrustworthy based on the things that she did. And I don't believe that she is watched to do the way that she talked about it. So, and I don't think she should be running the White House because she, struck a horrible nuclear deal, has a very different view of the Middle East, abandoned U.S. people in Benghazi and left them to die for political gain. And, those are the specifics that I don't like about her. Not just this generalization that have the kind of character. And I'm not looking for some hypothetical character to support. I'm looking for, someone that's done some things and, has issues behind them.
Okay. I hear that. And here's the thing. I don't want to, this is the hard thing about this conversation. You clearly believe that. You clearly believe that in Benghazi, she committed some kind of act of treason and did not fulfill her duty as Secretary of State. I think that's nonsense. I think there was entire congressional inquiry into that. She was not found guilty of that. I think holding that view is a totally fine view to hold. I just don't think we get anywhere by relitigating that opinion. I grant you that you believe that that's true, that you believe that the Clintons behaved in ways with their foundation that was illegal. I mean, not to sound like a Trump supporter, but hey, until you can prove it, it isn't true. And I just think it's fundamentally not provable nor true. That's why I'm pulling back a bit, because it does sound to me like what you're saying is, well, because of that, she should go to jail, and the kind of person who should be in jail shouldn't get to be the president. So I do think it actually is that you're saying those things I believe to be true about her disqualify her from being the president. Like, I don't think you feel like Ronald Reagan shouldn't have been the president, even though he violated his constitutional oath by the Iran-Contra deal or by the ways that he behaved in selling arms to Iran. I don't think you think that Ronald Reagan should not have been president because of those things. I think you're comfortable that someone could do something like that and still be a great president. That's where I get confused. And then you think, well, then Donald Trump is the sort of person that you think is going to be trustworthy. So that's why I'm not trying to dodge the question. I'm trying to find the place where that moves, where the same values that you hold about some people seem like they're different in what you're holding about the Clintons.
Yeah, I can appreciate that question. You know, I mean, I have a personal opinion and I have an
Sure.
emotional connection, commitment to a lifetime of thinking in a particular way. And, I've studied world religions and the other side of the aisle. And I mean, I'm no novice when it comes to thinking through other people's topics, but,
Yeah.
um, I, there's definitely a component there. I mean, the only person that's not a hypocrite is the person that stands for nothing. Um,
That's a great line.
and
Yeah.
it's the reality,
Yeah.
that's me, I made it up.
Yeah.
But that's the reality of the human condition. And um, when enough of those things start piling on themselves and you start
Yeah.
detecting a pattern of hypocrisy and double standards, that's alarming to me.
Yeah.
um, if you want to go back and look at the Iran Contra affair, pieces of that, I mean, that was a troubling time. And Reagan made a couple of pretty serious mistakes, I think, in dealing with foreign policy and American, executive overreach. And he wouldn't have been a human president if he.
Yeah. So okay, so in that generous notion, and thank you, I appreciate that. Saying, well, look, hey, everybody's going to have a mistake. Those mistakes for um, Hillary Clinton were clearly disqualifying. The ones for Donald Trump clearly were not. And that's fair, right? I mean, I think Donald Trump's things were totally disqualifying. I think he is totally unfit to be the president of the United States. I think he demonstrated it before the election and now, for sure. I don't think the things that Hillary Clinton is accused of or the mistakes that she made, which are legion, or I don't think that those disqualify her, right? So that's fair, right? We're both people who are predisposed to granting a little bit more freedom and grace on the one side than the other. Um, I do think it's fair, and I do want you to be. And people have asked me this: if hey, they've said, hey, is Adam ever going to get a chance to sort of, bend you over the proverbial barrel and make you answer for why you why you vote for the way you do and all that? And yes, Adam and I talked about this, and in coming episodes, that will be something that he'll do. Or we could even do it tonight if you want to. So I'm not trying to say you're not pure in your voting. I'm really not trying to say that. And if I have said that, I want to not say that again. What I'm trying to get at is you clearly, and this is what I've respected so much about our time together, you clearly have a commitment to the views you hold. And I just would have guessed, like, had you and I gotten to know each other a year ago before the election, I would have said, Adam's one of those guys that will not, there's no way he could vote for Trump. I mean, he is a principled conservative, first of all. And secondly, he's going to say, I just think the presidency requires a much higher standard of the kind of person we want. And I think character matters. And I think a lot of people felt that way about loved ones in their families. And then they ran into another experience and were just really shocked by that. So I'm not trying to say, hey, Adam, you didn't meet my expectations. This is what I find intriguing about you is you are equally as you are still principled. Like, I don't think you've given up your principles by your support of Donald Trump in the past and presently. I think you've found a way to reconcile that, and that's what I'm trying to understand. So that's what's helpful for me in kind of pulling back from the specific policy or I don't know, scandalous issues about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or any other candidate.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. And I mean, I have a couple of comments in that regard. I mean, one of them is I have the fundamental belief that the change that needs to happen in this nation is not going to happen from the president or the federal government or the people that are in charge. And that's why I spent the good bulk of my life working in the ministry and connecting to people in an individual way and praying for them and being present with them when they're hurting and learning what people thought and why they thought in other world cultures. I believe that are the ones that can make the change. And the change isn't getting their man or their woman in office. that need to happen there. And, you know, in some respects, if my whole life was built around the fact that I was hoping and praying that some sort of democratic messianic president would take us out of this dark hole and take us back into the glorious lights and maybe initiate the rapture or something, you know, maybe there'd be a little more of a conflict, but I don't hold that view. And that stuff on Trump. I think he's opened the door in a unique way for people to have a voice that didn't. There's something that can happen inside of that that's significant from the people. And, you know, and secondly, one point that I made last week, which, you know, I know is difficult to hear, but if I hadn't had a personal connection with the voice of God, very similar things locally, statewide, and nationally. If I didn't have that support circle structure, it would have been a very difficult journey to move out of the principled thing into an ongoing support of Trump. But I continue to support him and said yes to this because I think he represents not the man, maybe just the disruption, the chaos. Growth comes in the disruption. Maybe it's just the chaos where people are finally doing this kind of stuff. Oh, I don't know, but I have hope for it, and I want to see what it is, and I want to for it when it starts happening.
Yeah, well, thank you, and that is wonderful. And I'll tell you, I'm going to borrow that hope from you on this one. That is a contagious hope that some kinds of conversations that have clearly gone unsaid and unengaged need to happen now. Here's what I was hearing from you, and tell me if I'm hearing you right. Last week, I said to you something about a theocracy, and your response was really quick. I think your head even snapped back. You're like, whoa, 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 who's talking about a theocracy? And I said, yeah, right. Well, I am, because you said the hand of God is on this person. And then you corrected that. And here you said something that I think is really helpful for me on this. And that is, you've kind of stepped back with this almost Christian libertarian sort of flavor. I don't mean either of those insultingly, even though I'm not a big fan of libertarians, but I don't mean that insultingly. You're basically saying, hey, Doug, look, I'm putting words in your mouth. Hey, Doug, look, if anybody's overplaying the God-ordained part of the presidency here, it's you, Christians, that are freaking out that you can't imagine a world in which goodness still flows in the United States because we have the wrong president. That, again, paraphrasing you saying, I'm not the one saying that the life of God is bound up in the presidency. You seem to be saying that because you're freaking out and can't seem to understand how the goodnesses of we the people and of the Spirit of God that blows wherever it will, no matter who's the president. So if anybody needs to sort of step back from their overplaying of the power of the presidency, it's you, Doug. Does that capture your comments?
Well, I like how you just attacked yourself. I like that. That was good. Yes, I mean, and I've always had a personal problem and just an issue. I think that there's a better conversation to have. Bible into the office of the presidency, then everything's going to be better. That isn't the model of the New Testament. Jesus didn't come to overthrow Rome. He came to subvert the kingdoms of this earth with the leaven of heaven that he put in his disciples, and he poured out. Mm-hmm. Celebrating tonight, the final night.
Yeah, I think I got all of that on my end that was breaking up. And by the way, if anybody's watching this, I think Adam and I are both going to have audio from both sides. So we'll put that together in the podcast. So I think you'll get to hear all of this if it's breaking up on one side or the other in the audio version of this. Yeah, that's okay. I take that. That's a good point. I think that's something. But then there's the civic side of me, just so you sort of understand where I'm coming from, that we have a unique experiment in this country of a we the people, and anyone who puts the power of the federal, and now I'm going to sound like one of those worried conservatives, when you put the power of the federal government on the backs of the weak, and you limit the access to people in this country to that which should be available to all people, it really is a problem. You don't need a messianic person to do that, but you need a stable person. We have, and this is my view, this is why I think this is such a big problem, even in light of my version of your critique that you so nicely brought to me, is I think we've endowed the presidency of the United States with an awful lot of power. Now we can have a conversation later if that's a good thing or not a good thing. A lot of people want to argue it's not a good thing, and that's a fine conversation to have, but it's a real thing. And in light of that, and in light of that, I think we have to be real. I think we would both agree on this. We have to be really careful about the person that wields that kind of power. And
Yeah.
you've said, I think articulated well tonight, Hillary Clinton did not meet that standard for you. And someone like me is like, Donald Trump did not meet that standard for me. And I have a lot of friends who've said, look, I felt like I had two really bad choices to make. And I don't ever want to be put in that position again, which, maybe is why, we should be talking about a Doug and Adam ticket 2020.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what this is all about. We're the only two people that either of us would actually vote for, right? With a good clean conscience. Yeah, with a good clean conscience.
Well, I think that's a really good point, and I think that it opens up and it sort of begs the question. I mean, in philosophy, when we get to a thing like this, it sort of begs question of, okay, so is there an invitation? Can we get involved in the civic discourse?
Yeah.
Be just as flawed, if not more flawed, than the loser. Does that spurn people to get involved and to begin having a voice and getting into more of the civic discourse? And I think people are doing that. My major concern, which precipitated a lot of this stuff for us, is that I don't think people are equipped to get into that civic discourse and that civic activity and not be inflamed and enraged emotionally and incapable.
Yeah.
Find real solutions. So someone's got to be teaching people and helping people with that capacity. But I think that election, people are engaged. A bad outcome, there's a whole lot more hate coming up. But a good outcome is that if you need healing, there's three things that need for heart. There's three things that are needed. Time, but time doesn't heal all wounds. You also need a sterile environment where you're not going to get Importantly, you need air. So one of the things that's happened is that the heartache and the division in America is getting exposed right now. It's getting air. Something's getting seen, and we have a question. Time is going to pass, but are we going to create a toxic environment, or can we give our fledgling divided nation a little bit over time as it gets exposed without causing rhetoric and division? And I want to work towards helping clean up the discourse. Because people are shouting out, hey, I'm hurting. Privileged. I'm concerned that people are getting off of welfare. They're being, shoved off of food stamps. I'm concerned that they've lost access to affordable health care. I'm concerned about all these things, but I'm angry and I don't know what to do. Pursuing understanding is one way to begin helping people get healed from whatever is going on in policy decisions and discussions that need to be done. That's what I'm after. And I don't know where the solutions are yet, because I think that we've got such a divide rhetoric that we can't even get to those discussions.
Yeah.
And why I've so appreciated this. I'm going to get off my soapbox, but
no, I think you should stay on that soapbox. I think that's really helpful. And there's an interesting thing happening in the video here that there's this little lag, and then the commentary comes. And so there's this thing you were mentioning earlier. You need that space to let it sit in. So it had this really nice, on my side, at least the side I'm recording on, it's really nice cadence to it. Um, so can I just ask you something about that? I like that so much. And that's the kind of thing I've heard you say in our conversation last week and the number of conversations we had in preparation for this. And that's the kind of thing that makes me say, I would have totally thought there's no way Adam Schindler was going to support Donald Trump, because he does none of that. He inflames, he enrages, he literally calls people names. He just brings to the surface that kind of way of divisiveness, like I just think we have never seen in this country, to the point that you don't know on any given day who has been insulted and which part of our society feels like they're in a fight with the president. So that's part of what's so curious to me. And maybe this is giving someone the vaccine. You have to give them a bit of the poison so that their body will create the antibodies. And that can seem, if you don't believe in vaccines, that can seem crazy that you would do something like that. Maybe that's what you're getting at. But that thing you just said about let's have this kind of world where we understand and listen to each other and treat one another with respect and get to solutions, I got to tell you, that's like, well, wouldn't that be great? That's not what's going on at all. We are nowhere near that in this country in the last 9 months since the inauguration of Donald J. Trump as the president of the United States. It doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere closer to that. So that's again where the beauty of what you said then is matched with this dissonance of, oh my gosh, wow. So I don't know. I don't want you to have to explain away the behavior of Donald Trump, but and maybe you feel that same frustration that those things are still that those things are happening inside of his presidency.
I am definitely frustrated with many of the things that he says and the way that he says them and the kind of stuff that comes out. Well, but to the larger point there is that, I have a little line that all of my my major spiritual growth has always come not from competency, but exhaustion. And there's this reality that at the point that I'm so tired, I can't keep doing it, I throw up my hands, and then something really begins to change. Is the agent of this or an unwitting accomplice?
Yeah.
We're not more divided now because Trump got elected. I don't believe that. I think we're more willing to voice our division now that he's been. I don't think that the media was any less divisive prior to him. I just think they had to out themselves. And that's another topic.
You mean Breitbart, right? By the media.
Well,
that's who you mean. I'm just teasing you. Both sides have their own media, don't they?
Oh yeah.
So I use the analogy at this just after Donald Trump's election that, and I'm careful to use this now because of our current situation, but that thinking about it as a natural disaster and as a hurricane is a way to think about this. You saw it coming. You knew the damage was going to happen. You prepared as much as you could. You hope you had built the infrastructure that could withstand it. There's going to be damage, and then people are going to have to heal and are going to have to repair that damage. That's been my vantage point on the presidency, right? So, and I had a friend who actually used that analogy. She didn't know that I'd referred to it that way. And she said, boy, when I heard Adam last week say that there was like prophecy that Trump was going to win, I believe that's true, but I think that was a warning. I don't think that was a chance for cheering. So I have been saying for the last 9 months, okay, we're in the midst of the storm. We're going to have to prepare, and hopefully we can limit the damage, and our civic life and our institutions of government can withstand this. It's going to be okay. It withstood Reagan, it withstood Nixon, it withstood an impeachment of Clinton, like it withstood assassinations and assassinations attempt. It can do it, but it's going to bring real damage. So I've been saying it like that. So to hear you say, to make it more of a positive of, hey, look, when things get hard, when the shit hits the fan, when things get really difficult, there's a place for some growth to happen there. I think both of those are true. But it could feel like it falls on deaf ears, like when Donald Trump says, well, hey, Puerto Rico's got to, figure out how to solve its problems. Like, dude, they're in the middle of a terribly destructive natural disaster. This is not the time to say, there's a lot of character that comes when you're in the midst of trauma. That's just not the time to say it. And I wonder if that's what's happening in our society. People like me are saying, this is really, really bad. And to hear someone else say, which is, I think, true, hey, there's a kind of growth that can happen, or there is no situation in which God is not active and working and can work together for the good of all things in every situation. It can still feel, offbeat a little bit. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
And I'm not critiquing your comment there. I just wonder if that's how it's landing differently on different groups of people.
One of the first pieces of theology I began to study was the theodicy, because I really struggled with why do bad things happen to good people, and why do good things happen to bad people, and And then there's other people that just lost their daughter and they don't need a theological answer. They're in a place of traumatic grieving and need something very different than some kind of a theological moralism about God's sovereignty. They need presence. They need space held for them. And so in that capacity, clearly there are people who are what they feel like is the Trump hurricane battering the American shores. And I would have a very different comment and response to someone who is in a real place of grief than those Hurricane Trump. That's a different kind of an argument with a little bit. And so I also piece of debate, one that's brought the damage. I think that he certainly has done some things that were divisive, but let's remember this, and I think this is true, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong here, but I think offense is not something that gets done to you, it's a choice that you make. And that there are genuinely offensive things that people do, but if you don't receive that offense inside of you, if you don't have a place inside of you that says, I'm either weak or I'm hurting or I just don't like that.
Yeah, your audio pause there. Okay, yeah, let's talk about, maybe we can pick that up next week. I don't think Donald Trump is offensive. I think he's assaulting. And I think in our society, we separate an offense from an assault. And assault is different than battery. So battery is when you physically harm someone. Assault is when you threaten them. I think he's not just being insulting, and people should toughen up and not take the insult. I think he's utilizing a position of power that actually does real damage by the actual threat itself. But I think that's worth us picking up is there something going on in our culture and society in which there's real damage being done to people? Because I've just been around too many people who've actually been harmed by others to buy the idea, have been harmed by other people to buy the idea that, hey, just, lock your mind and say that didn't happen to me. There's a kind of offense and assault.
Not an either or.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's two different categories of this, it seems to me. And the question is, which one is this, right? Is this the kind of thing where you say, hey, you lost and you're having a hard time coming to grips with that? Or, whoa, this is of a whole different measure of what's going on. And as a country, we should not be endorsing this kind of thing. Adam, thank you again. Thanks for putting up with all the audio slowness. And those who watched, thanks for sticking with all of this. We hope the audio of our two sides audio merging together works out. I really appreciate it, Adam. We're going to be back again next week, everybody. If you have questions or comments, we're going to, in fact, next week, we're going to involve some comments and questions that people have. And I've been hearing a lot from people, so we're going to try to dive into that. And for those who've wondered if we can talk about this for 7 weeks or not, I think tonight we proved absolutely we can talk about this for 7 weeks. Adam, thank you, and all the best to you.
Absolutely. See you, Doug.